the key thing about my current position, 4 days teaching and 1 day doing this, is that I'm still a consumer of Inset. So I'm quite often sat where you are. At the beginning of January, I'm sat where you were. At the beginning of April, I'll be sat where you are. So I know what I like when I'm receiving Inset. And it's really interesting to have 2 or 3 hours of theory and research. But actually, what I need as a visit teacher is stuff that I can take straight to the classroom the next day. You don't want to do it the next day because it's half term. But next week, you want to think about stuff that you can take in because you're going to have loads of emails, loads of marking. You won't have a lot of energy. So I'm going to machine gun you. I'm going to machine gun you with techniques. Some of them will hit and you think, oh, I've done that recently, or that's a great new idea. Some of them you'll think, not for me, and that's absolutely fine because we've got all subjects, all styles of teaching in here. But the ones that really matter for me are the ones where you sit there and think, this doesn't really work for me or my subject, but can I adapt it? So please keep an open mind. Everything Lucy tells me about the school is you are very open-minded, so I don't think that would be an issue for you. So we're going to start with a picture which for me represents education in this country, or at least it represents what our students believe education should be. Anyone want to guess which country I took the picture? Wales! It's not Wales, it is the USA, yeah. It is America. So here are our students here. And this is kind of what we're under pressure to do, isn't it? We know we have exam results at the end of the day. We are judged by them. The school stays alive because of them. And route 1 is very much didactic. I'm just going to tell you where you need to go, what you need to know. I'm going to plough through the curriculum and I'm going to make it easy for you. Today, I'm going to try and persuade you that there is another way. And that doesn't mean that didactic teaching doesn't have its place, of course it does. I think as a profession, just from my experience of watching hundreds, thousands of lessons at my school and other schools, I think we miss opportunities to do more independent learning. And I think we revert to didactic a bit too much. So I'm going to give you a few alternatives for some of them. You had another friend of mine, you had Will Orr in last year. Will, I know you found him fantastic. He is awesome. And he talked to you about growth mindset. So I'm going to keep sort of reminding you of some of those key messages from growth mindset. And the key one for me about growth mindset is failure. So we have to teach kids to fail. Failure is part of learning. You have to fail, fail again, fail better, as some better. I was in a primary school last year, and it had up in it, every classroom would have fail, F-A-I-L. First attempt in learning. If you don't believe me, think about how little children learn to walk or talk. I've got a 19-month-old who is probably at a sort of running, staggering stage at the moment. And it's fascinating watching his development because he fails every day. He fails terribly every day. He hurts himself every day. But at no point does he sort of dust himself off and think, I've just hit my head against the table. My family, we're not walkers. The Wells says we don't really do walking. I'm going to give up on walking. I'm going to stick to crawling. I'm good at crawling. I'll just stick with crawling because it's safe and it works. No kid ever does that. They keep bouncing back. They keep trying. We have this innate ability to learn. It's fascinating. I do the PE department might know Timothy Galway, The Inner Game. Fantastic book. The Inner Game of Tennis, and he's written a lot more about other sports. And his message is basically, when we're little, we have this unbelievable ability and trust in ourselves to just learn, no matter how badly things go wrong. And that the older we get, the less we trust that, and the more we think, oh, we need instructing. But that's still in us, that's still in every single one of us. A natural ability to learn things. The growth mindset is not, I can't do it. The growth mindset is, I can't do it yet. And you persevere. There's a great video as well. It's getting very sporty. There's a great video, Michael Jordan. Just type in failure into YouTube. We'll have a bit more time today. I'm not showing it to you. It's about 30 seconds long, that's all. And he talks about failure, and the strap line is basically, because I fail, I succeed. The only time failure matters is really, let's be honest, is GCSEs and A-levels, stuff that stays on your film forever. The more you fail in the process up to those exams, I strongly believe, and I've taught it that way to every kid I've had in 20 years, the more I can teach them to fail in that process leading up to an exam, the less likely they are to fail in the exam. They need to get stuff wrong. I need to push them outside their comfort zone. And embrace failure. It's okay. Right, question to you. I'm going to count to 5, and I want you to shout out the percentage that you believe is best in your classroom. So what percentage of the questions you ask do you like your students to get right? Okay, just an average across the year groups. Just have a think, I'll count to 5, shout out the number. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, yep. 70%. 90%. It totally depends. There is no right answer. There really isn't a right answer. What matters is when you are asking the question. So my answer, if I was reviewing something I'd done in the previous lesson, I'd probably want that percentage to be higher. If I was doing something new, I would want that percentage to be lower. I wouldn't want them getting 90 to 100% of all the questions right if we're doing something new. I teach languages, and failure is such a significant part of learning a language. It's quite obvious for us, but it's true for every subject. You have to give them opportunities to get stuck. Okay, next question to you. You can either do this verbally, the person next to you, or you can write down your answers. Could you please, 30 seconds, come up with all the reasons why we ask questions, what are the purposes of questions. So that is kind of expectations from parents, from students, and maybe even us sometimes. So you start the year here, when you start your school career here, and that's when you leave Herodian, or that's the end of your school year, and that is the progress we're expected to make, and that's what progress looks like. We all know it doesn't come out that way, it doesn't look that way. That is normal, that's natural, that's the true nature of learning. I show these graphs to every class I have at the beginning of the year, and then regularly throughout the year, because when they have these moments here or there, I want to remind them that this is normal, it's natural, it's okay, and if they keep working hard, if they don't give up, and if they have good strategies, that's growth mindset, it's free, then they will come out the other end eventually. And that's fine, that's cool. So another question. You've asked your question, and the student has got it right. Fantastic, okay? 5 seconds, I want you to shout out, what do you say back? What's the most common thing you say back to a student? So, could you now think of alternatives to positive affirmation? What else could you say when someone gets the answer right? What else could you say? What else do you say? There we go. So here are some ideas. I'm sure you will have all of these and many more down. So why is a really simple way of extending, but there's lots of other things you could do. And why do we need to do this? Well, there is of course the fact they might have got lucky with the right answer. There is of course the fact that they might have done it by coincidence, so they've got some relevant knowledge and it just happens to fit in with that bit of syllabus. Or it could be, and I think this is the most common one, it could be partial understanding. They actually really got it, and in an exam situation, they might struggle. So really useful to follow it up with questions whenever you dare. Of course, I'm not saying you're going to do this every time, because if you do this for a day or two after half term, your students will stop putting their hands up. They'll get really peed off with you. There's no point giving a right answer in Mr. X's class because all this horrible stuff happens afterwards. But it is a good thing to do from time to time, because then they think whenever you ask a question, you might do that. And that therefore makes them think a bit deeper. And a guy called Doug Lemov, I don't know if you've come across him. He's a bit of an American, I hate the word guru, but he's kind of a bit of an American teaching guru. He's written a really, really good book, Teach Like a Champion. You have to kind of skin it a bit, because it's quite long, and it takes 5 pages to describe something that you can do in 5 lines. But the content is fabulous. There's loads of practical techniques. I've nicked 2 or 3 of them for today. And he basically says that we need to ask follow-up questions as often as we dare in order to extend them, but also test reliability. Today's all about independent learners. This fits in beautifully with that. Back to growth mindset. How often do we ask questions which encourage effort rather than achievement or attainment? So some examples of how you might do that on the board, but you're basically rewarding them for trying, for having a go, or for putting in a bit of extra for homework, even if it went wrong. We're not going to go on about assessment very much today, but developing independent learners, a lot of that is about assessment.
if you could design the ultimate assessment program in a school and not have external exams at any point to worry about, you'd probably only have effort commented on. You wouldn't have attainment commented on at all. And I think you can still do that in a lot of subjects in a lot of the time. But if you just comment on the processes they've gone through to do the piece of work, and you point out how they could improve it, you are training them to be independent learners, you're training them to do the good stuff. If we just put a mark on the other extreme, you just literally grade it, they don't learn as they do it. If you grade it and put comments on, they tend to look at the grade and sometimes they'll just think, well, I've done well, so I don't need to read anymore. Or I've done badly, I'm so humiliated or distraught, I'm not going to read anymore either. You know, kids are obsessed about marks, don't they? I'm just going to show you, I'm doing a trial with my first year German class this year. And I have not written a single grade on their work all year. But I said to them, you can come and look at the mark book anytime you want. I will tell you what grade I put in your mark book anytime you like. How many kids do you think have come and asked me for their grade? None. Not once. Not once. And all they get are the comments. They focus on the comments, and it's been brilliant. You know, I'm going to do it with every class next year. I'm going to try it with every class, including A-level GCSE. So I mentioned these earlier. You want to encourage kids to learn independently. What do you praise them for? Well, I'm afraid there is no way around it for them. There is a direct correlation between hours and quality. The harder you work, generally on average, the better you do. You can't get around that. But there's two other factors that are big as well. Number one, how soon do they give up? How quickly do they sort of throw the towel in? How quickly do they seek help from mum and dad and from you? Or do they think, I've been here before, I'm just going to try for another minute or two, can I get over this on myself? And if they can do that, then that's nirvana, because it's more likely to happen again. It's a positive reinforcement. And then the last one is really, really big time where we come in, which is helping them out with good strategies for learning. Different ways of revising, different ways of cracking an equation, whatever it might be. I mentioned didactic teaching earlier, and again, please don't walk out here thinking I don't think it has a place. Of course it has a place. But if we do too much of it, the danger is we're not mirroring what children do the rest of the time. Just watch kids at break time, lunchtime, talking to each other, and they do talk, don't they? And what they're doing is they're looking for meaning, they're negotiating, they're trying to persuade. That's what they do naturally. That's what conversation between human beings tends to be. They share information as well. So if we can make our lessons a bit more interactive and a little bit more mirroring what they do naturally for themselves at break time or lunchtime, then you are appealing directly to their natural sense of learning, to their true learning style. So just a quick summary. This first section is what I call classroom culture. Just setting the right atmosphere within which independent learning can thrive. And there were just a few of my ideas for how you might do that. Okay, on to some practical techniques. How you can stop working so hard as a teacher and actually get the students to do the work, because they're the ones that are sitting the exams, not you. So we're going to start with an exercise that's based around Orlando Bloom's taxonomy. When he's not in films, he came up with this really clever hierarchy of thinking, which confusingly I've got upside down, because this is actually lower order thinking here. So I'm going to give you an example of, let's go for a geography lesson. We're the geographers. Or any jokes about you know where you are in geography or whatever. Knowledge would be, what is the capital city of the UK? Okay, you either know it or you don't know it. True or false? They're quite often closed questions. Nothing wrong with closed questions. Most exams are full of closed questions. But you might want to stretch them a bit more by moving down his taxonomy. So could you come up with reasons why London was chosen as the capital city? Could you select another city in the UK that would take over if London wasn't the capital city? So more demanding questions engaging with the topic. And then here, this is where real, deep, proper, independent learning happens. So this would be things like, could you come up with a list of criteria for picking a capital city? Could you compare and contrast reasons why London was picked for the UK with Bonn in the Old West German? So justify, evaluate, compare, contrast, rank, all these things are higher order thinking, and they promote independent thinking, independent learning. So what we're going to do is an activity involving post-it notes. We're just going to show you a little bit of research. Of all the the questions that we ask in the classroom, 60% of them on average are knowledge. What do you know? Nothing wrong with that, per se. 20% of them are procedural. Do you know what you're doing now? Does everyone understand? That kind of thing. It only leaves 20% for the really, really big, important stuff, for the deep thinking, for the independent learning. So, unless we increase our percentage of those sorts of questions, we need to make sure those questions are really good. So I'm going to show you a practical activity now, using post-it notes, which will demonstrate moving through blooms. And it's one of those activities I've picked it for today because I think you can use it in every subject. You can adapt and apply it to every subject. In order to do this activity, you need to clear your desks, please. So if you'd like to put stuff on the floor, you can leave the pile of coins in the middle, that's fine. So I hope you can see how we've gone through taxonomy to the higher order thinking, the stuff that really develops independent learning. But also, research will show you, the more evaluation, synthesis and analysis kids do in lessons, the more engaged they are with the knowledge, the more they remember the knowledge. So although you might think, oh, but I'm not putting in any more of the curriculum, actually what's happening is the stuff that they know already, they're going to know a hell of a lot better. You don't have to have quite as many clinics or catch-up things when they fail tests, because what you're doing is making all that stuff memorable by doing an activity like this. And what I also do, I didn't do it here, but I go around with some post-it notes and I chuck in some new stuff. So every table gets a couple of post-it notes that I've written. I'll teach one or two people at the table what they are, and then I rely on that to get around during the other activities so that everyone at the end knows who Baron Pierre de Coubertin is, or everybody knows that Jacques Robert was the chair of the IOC at London 2012. Whatever it is, I'll put in the sort of the new knowledge that can go in that. Obviously with post-it note, they need some existing knowledge. I wouldn't do it at the start of the topic. I'd do it at least halfway through. But it's a really nice sort of synthesis activity towards the end as well. Okay. I'm sorry now, Heather, if you the school is bankrupt for buying post-it notes. Okay, we're going to call on an old sort of hero of mine, a guy called Edward de Bono. He came up with 6 thinking hats. It's what he's most famous for. We're not doing hats today. They are great, and it's very easy to learn what they are. It takes about 2 minutes to teach kids what they are, and they're really useful. But today we're going to use one of his other techniques. It's called range of skills. It's called a PMI. Okay, and I use this technique for exploring a topic. So P and M are really obvious, they're intuitive. We do this in most subjects. What are the pros and the cons, the advantages, the disadvantages. But what I like about PMI is it encourages a third tranche of thinking, a third angle. What comes under I? Well, it could literally, but best of all, what I like to use the I for is interesting questions. So in that tranche, the kids think of what if questions. They think of things that they'd like to know more about that they don't know. And if they're what if questions, actually the beauty of asking a question is not necessarily knowing the answer, it's actually formulating the question, having that thought. You know, that's a big part of independent learning. We've talked about the importance of us asking questions. Well, here's the importance of kids being encouraged to ask questions too. So let me show you by an example what I mean by PMI, what it might look like. So I understand you had some terrorism training this morning, so this is slightly appropriate, bizarrely. So let's do a PMI on what if we armed every single member of the constabulary. Well, the pros would be you could deal with terrorism and violent crime much quicker, more effectively, and they could defend themselves better. It always makes me shudder when I think of policemen running into scenarios with literally with a truncheon against someone armed with a knife or worse. Downside, well, I think the British police are known for being approachable, don't snigger, but compared to, and I obviously know France and Germany very well, you walk up to a policeman or policewoman there, they tend to have a pretty large gun pointing somewhere vaguely near you, and I want to go and ask where Starbucks is. I'd rather ask a British policeman that. And also, of course, sometimes people get shot in crossfire, sometimes the wrong people will be shot. It could increase fatalities. Show off what you know. So, I'm lucky, I'm pretty well travelled. I can't think of another European country where the standard operating police man or woman isn't armed, or at least the majority of them aren't armed. It's quite unusual. So that's interesting. I could also ask questions though. If we were to train the whole of the police up, how long would it take? What would it cost? What weapons would we give them? What would be their rules of engagement? What would happen every time they fired their gun? Would it trigger, as it does at the moment, an independent inquiry? Would crime go up or down? What particular kinds of crime, what rates of crime might go up or down? Would criminals buy more guns? Would we end up with a black market for guns, etc., etc., etc.? I don't know the answer to a lot of these questions, but it's really good for my learning to ask those questions. So, the best way to learn anything is to have a go yourself. So I'm going to give you a topic to do a PMI on. You can structure it how you like. The most traditional way is to draw, now depending on how old you are, sort of my age and above, I describe it as the campaign for nuclear disarmament. If you're younger than that, it's a Mercedes-Benz sign. So you just draw a circle and divide it into 3, PMI. And then what I'd like to do a PMI on is something you might do in physics. It's stuck. How the hell did we win the technology award? There we go. Oh, we're in. Cool. Right, I'll get IT in whilst that's going on. It's going to sticky track. So, what if the Earth were 100,000 miles nearer the Sun? Just pretend it could happen. One of your eyes might be how would it happen. Could you do a PMI on that proposal? Okay, away you go. Negatives, you might have said everyone else's birthdays will come around sooner. You might also have said, well, there's going to be a far greater risk of skin cancer and the like. And you might have gone real doomsday scenario and just said, our very delicate balance of nature will just be wrecked and we'll all be doomed. Interesting though, that's just what I want to focus on. What questions did you come up with under interest? Anyone want to share any questions? Good old-fashioned hands up. Yes, sir, at the back.
Will it make any difference at all? Because 100,000 miles in the context of distance isn't very much.
Yeah, great, yeah. So is it about 93 million, 92 million to the Sun?
93 million. It's a seventh of a degree.
Google. Professor Google. It's seventh of a degree, yeah. It's not, you're right, it's very minute, yeah. And you see, this happens in the classroom. So this is lovely, because if you were my students, you've asked the question and you've provided some information for it. That might be really relevant, useful knowledge, but it hasn't come from me. I've avoided didactic, shoveling it in. I've actually teased some of the learning out of the students. This is great for 2 reasons. Number one, it's really good because it engages the students. But number 2, even better, it does what's called, it decontaminates learning. So if I'm a totally didactic teacher and you learn everything about my subject from me, when you're sat in a test or an exam, everything has come from one source and it's harder to separate out all of that learning. But if some of the learning has come from different people in the classroom, you're much more likely to remember it. So I don't know your name, sir, sorry. So Alistair has just given an answer there. I guarantee you, if I came back on the Monday after half term and said, what did Alistair say? You'd all say 7th of a degree. Could you repeat everything I said? No, because I'm doing lots of talking. So that's the power of using your students to teach ideas. This time, of course, you're just going to write it as a little list down the left-hand side. No sentences, no paragraphs, no essays. It's just random points about this particular topic. Okay? It can be names, dates, places, nouns, verbs, adjectives, adverbs. I don't care. But you're going to have a ridiculously short amount of time. You are going to still have ideas when I say stop writing. I'm only going to give you 25 seconds, so you've got to have flames pouring off the page. And then I'll tell you what happens next. Okay? Here's my old mate Lemov, the American guy. 5 main reasons for asking questions. And I guess, in the context of today, independent learning, we're really talking about number 2, and we're talking about number 4. There's more research that's gone into why questions are so good. So this guy Meyer, as a university lecturer, and what he did at the beginning of one trimester, because he's American, was he gave all of his students clickers. So he lectures in halls with hundreds of students, each of them had a clicker. And then he spent the whole of that term doing lectures where regularly he would ask questions that required them to use their clickers. So really, basic interactions. And he found it had a really profound impact on their learning. You probably guessed it improved versus the control group. But what was interesting was when he was asking them, well, why did having a clicker help them? And he elicited 3 reasons why asking questions is really good. Number 1, it makes you listen more. Why? Because you anticipate being asked a question. Even when you're not being asked a question, you think you might be about to be asked a question. So you pay attention more. So I've got this inner voice when I'm teaching, I don't know if you have it as well, really annoying inner voice, I can't shut up, but it's actually quite helpful. And it tells me things like, you have just spoken for 4 minutes, they've done nothing, they've said nothing, look at them, they're all dozing off. Why haven't you asked a question? And I always think about Maya at that point, I think, well, if I do too much of that, they're going to realise, oh, this is good, we can be passengers in Mr. Wells' lessons, because he doesn't ask questions. Number 2, you ask questions regularly, and it means that students have to access knowledge, they have to use the knowledge. And number 3, the best one is, it makes them metacognitive. Where's the classics department? What does metacognitive mean? Thinking above thinking, yeah, meta means above, doesn't it? Yeah. Thinking about thinking, learning about learning is the word. So questions encourage metacognition because it makes them evaluate how well they know stuff. So that's really important in terms of prep for an exam. If you ask regular questions, that's what you do in an exam, you have to answer questions. Your students will be evaluating how well they know the stuff, how well they can apply it, because you keep asking them questions. Questions part 3, Vygotsky. How many of you remember Vygotsky from PGC? How many of you couldn't spell it like me as well? So he was a Russian psychologist. He talked about the zone of proximal development. In the middle here, sorry, it's not very clear, it's got things the learner can do on their own, and on the outside you've got things the learner cannot do. So good learning, good teaching operates in this zone here. I prefer a different version, which has comfort, stretch, and panic. So good questioning is just beyond where they are at the moment, but not so far that you lose them. That's good questioning. So just on the limit of their current knowledge. Right, we're going to do a bit of a survey now, see how well you know us as a profession. So you need a pen and a bit of paper. Just scribble down your answers. There absolutely is a role for quick-fire questioning. It's brilliant, it's energising, it's really good, but not the whole time. There are times when hopefully you're asking other questions that they need a bit of thinking time. What does this mean in practice? I think what this means is this, and I hear this lots in lessons. So I'm just going to give you the narrative of a lesson, okay? So don't answer the question, just let me carry on pretending to be the teacher and what happens. So here we go, history lesson. So when was the Battle of Hastings? Don't answer. So just listen, this is the narrative from the teacher. So when was the Battle of Hastings? Come on, we've done this, yeah? You know this is really important, we did this last week. We did a homework on it. Remember the Normans running up the hill? Yeah? It's on page 56 of the textbook. There's a picture of William landing at Pevensey. And you think, just shut up, please, teacher, shut up. Let the kids think. But we do tend to narrate thinking time, it's natural. As teachers, we sometimes sort of move away from silence because we think the kids will fill it. Actually, that silence can be golden. That silence can be really, really useful. So what does that mean if you only give them an average of 0.8 of a second? I'm not saying you guys do, but if you know a teacher that does this, well, surprise, surprise, the length of student answers isn't very long. It doesn't allow them to reflect. The most scary thing is, we give longer if we're asking more able students. We give them longer to think than less able students. Is that, I don't know, is that because we think they're going to use it better? I don't know, but it's the wrong way around, really. So, what am I saying here? Well, sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes, we need to be quieter and we need to give them thinking time. Lots of good things happen when you do that. If you increase from 0.8 to 3, they will speak for longer, their answers will be longer, especially if they're less able. They will stay on task, they'll be more relevant. They are more likely to answer, given more time to think. And best of all, they're more likely to ask questions. In other words, they're engaging with it, and they're being metacognitive and working out what they do and they don't understand and how they can apply that in an exam. So again, I'm not saying you should please don't sit there Monday week with a stopwatch. So when was the Battle of Hastings? 1, 2, okay, it's just something to think about, for all of us to think about, is when we need to, do we give that think time? And Lemov talks about a narrated wait time. So rather than, come on, you should know this is really important, I can't believe you don't know this is on page 56. Rather than that, just say things that will make them be scholarly with that for a few seconds, that will make them know you want them to think during that time. 3, 2, 1, go! Taking